Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Houston Roundball Review presents Folks Talking Sports. I'm Kris Gardner, one of the hosts from the Houston Roundball Review. Joining me this evening are two of the other three hosts of the show. Andy Yanez, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Kris. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. And then James Mueller, looking like a giant. I know James is sitting there in a I don't know what's. How are you, James?
I'm doing well.
He is taller than us, Andy. I don't know. Well, he is really in real life. He is too. I think about an inch or two. All right. Where do you guys want to get started? We kicked around a little bit about it. One of the polls, college football poll, I think, Andy. It was another Fox Sports poll, wasn't it?
Correct.
And who was the guy? I don't remember the name of the person. It wasn't Tim Brando. Somebody else. But this person. Go ahead, James.
Hang on, I'm pulling it up right now.
It was R.J. Young with Fox Sports.
Fox Sports.
R.J. Young, and he had the Cougs ranked 13th, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
James, what do you think about that?
Still thought it was a little too high, but not his worst ranking. Michigan State at 7 was worse than UH at 13, I think.
He did have Texas A&M in his top 5. In his top, well, they actually made an appearance. What was the last one we discussed last week where they had Texas A&M out of their top 16, which we both, or all three of us, were on board saying that was completely incorrect. And his justification, I can't remember his exact name, but I know he called Texas A&M overrated.
It was Tim Brando, yeah.
So it's better in that sense, but I tend to agree in terms of where Houston is ranked, and really the reason I can't see them be that high has to be with just looking at that defense. I know that was their strength last year, but I think they still got to prove themselves, especially in terms of the secondary, just in terms of the key players that they're missed, that they've lost, just in terms of losing them out due to them being able to move on to the next level. But I think they can't be top 20 in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure James agrees, because you had your own poll, James. Feel free to comment on your poll, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I had him at 20 in mine. I sort of have similar concerns like Andy mentioned. I don't think the defense will be terrible to where it was, but I don't think it's going to start out at the level it was last year, just with all the guys they lost, especially like Andy mentioned, secondary concerns. When you lose 2 corners with the caliber of Pepe Williams and Marcus Jones, that's just tough to replace. And also, it's hard to justify ranking them super high, in my opinion, just with the strength of the schedule, because, UTSA, Texas Tech, those are decent games. But other than that, they're not going to have to prove themselves very much until a potential, maybe an SMU or a conference championship. So it's just really hard to tell. But yeah, going into the season, anywhere inside of the top 15, I kind of find is a little bit of a stretch.
Well, I agree with both of you. I'm glad to see them ahead of Texas. I don't care whatever pool, anything Houston at Texas, I'm happy with. But yeah, 13 is kind of high to me. What are you going to say, Andy?
No, I was going to say, I think the question that really should be, at least when it regards to the American, it has to be if who should be ranked higher in terms of Houston or Cincinnati, because we saw the coaches poll that I believe it came out this past Monday. I'm losing track of my days. I can't remember if that was this week or the week before, but I do remember that Cincinnati was ranked higher than Houston, and I can't remember if they were 21 or 20. Poll. I know it was the coaches poll. I just can't remember when it came out.
I know this week, yeah.
And Houston was 25th in that one, and Cincinnati was ranked higher. I think that's the question right there that's intriguing. Kind of what we kind of justified for Houston probably being a little bit too high in that Fox Sports poll by R.J. Young, just in terms of what they're losing on the defense with Marcus Jones and Demarion Williams, and obviously, of course, Logan Hall up front. But they do have key veterans that are sticking around and are going to be counted on to lead that group. I think it's the same argument with Cincinnati and what they've lost, not only on the defensive end, but obviously the most important player in Desmond Ridder. They're losing him, and I think in most of the polls, which is interesting, I don't think Cincinnati should be ranked higher than Houston, at least in the preseason.
Yeah, and the AP comes out tomorrow, I think at 11 a.m. So that will be interesting to just see where they stand. But I agree with you. I expect Houston to be higher than Cincinnati just because while Cincinnati has had more success, like you said, they lost too many key pieces.
Yeah, didn't Cincinnati lose how many guys got drafted from Cincinnati?
So they lost their 2 starting corners, Desmond Ridder, their starting running back, a linebacker, at least 5. It was more than 5, but I'm missing people. But Alec Pierce,
yeah.
I think they had 8 or 9 total. I can't remember the number off the top of my
head. I just did a quick Google, and according to Sports Illustrated, they had 9 players drafted and taken in the 2022 NFL draft. So that's just that went in the draft, and obviously, of course, I would imagine they're losing more players, just as the usual in terms of them not being eligible in terms of graduating. But they're losing a lot, and that's why I think that Houston should be ahead of them in that aspect. But capping them off, I think 20 is probably the cap, and then like James said, anything above 15 is probably certainly early on wishful thinking.
Do you guys know, either one of you know, why for the second straight year Houston and Cincinnati are not playing each other?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't know exactly what, because typically how it's worked in the past is if you've missed, a team one year, you're playing them next year. It sort of rotates around.
Right.
You can't get everyone in the conference with the numbers, but you typically don't go multiple years without playing a school. So it's definitely especially Cincinnati and UCF to miss both those twice. Those are the 2 other relatively big dogs, you would say, in the conference. And so to miss those twice in a row is definitely strange.
I'm going to be petty. I think it's pettiness by the conference schedulers, whatever. They don't want the 3 best teams playing, 3 teams about to leave, go to the Big 12, not playing and hyping up. And what I would do if the matches were taking place is have a Big 12 flag run around the field in the matchup and have the broadcast crew saying, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a potential Big 12 matchup between Houston Cougars and the Cincinnati Bearcats or UCF, whatever, over and over again in the broadcast. Maybe that's why they have not scheduled it 2 years in a row. I don't know, but it doesn't make any sense to me for this matchup, either one, to not happen for 2 consecutive seasons. So that is notable to me, whether it's petty or not or ulterior motives, whatever, but it's definitely notable. Won't be an issue, hopefully, going forward in the Big 12 when the schedules come out next season. Actually, Big 12 is more proactive, so we might get some schedules early before July even happens next year, but 2023. Guys, we saw someone, I don't know who it was, on Twitter yesterday. Going to talk about it. University of Houston alums. Seems like more folks want to have form a NIL collective. Where do you guys stand on alums forming a collective? And I think it's reactionary rather than being proactive, but just other people wanting to create an NIL collective.
I mean, I can start. I think when you texted with us yesterday, when you said, like you just said, UH alums are typically more reactive than proactive. I think that capitalizes off it. Obviously, doing an NIL collective isn't a bad idea, and great that alums are pushing for it. But I mean, you can't always wait for a million other schools to do it and then be like, we need this. Like, start thinking outside. And a big reason why this started, I'm sure a bunch of people, at least UH people tuning into the show, saw on Twitter with Alton McCaskill had some NIL deals pulled with his injury, and he had some family issues, so he started a GoFundMe, and that was really successful and stuff. But just I think that was one of the big reasons that sparked some of these fans and alums being like, we need a collective, because Houston, if is not like other big time programs where they have all these deals set up for their athletes. Like we've been seeing, come into the news so often with a lot of these other programs.
Andy? Uh-oh, we lost him.
Can you guys?
There we go. And now we lost him again.
Can you hear me now?
Now,
yeah.
Yes.
There we go. By the way, shout out to Will, who's watching the show, left us a note. Have a great show, fellas. So we appreciate him tuning into us. But like James said, I think in terms of establishing an NIL collective, I think it certainly is something that has to be a necessary step that the University of Houston has to do and alums have to do, honestly. And we've kind of touched on it in the past, just in terms of Hoops and Holler. And I believe they dubbed themselves as a semi-collective.
Micro collective, I think is what
micro-collective. Correct. A micro-collective, which in and of itself, it's a bit of interesting, just the certain labeling to it. And then to be quite frank, when you look at a lot of the NIL deals from Houston, I would say probably about 85%, and that might just be generous. 85% of those deals, NIL deals that are announced, are from Star Pizza, and that just can't be the case. Especially, they're less than a year from joining the Big 12. They are, like Calvin Sampson has said numerous times during his summer availabilities, they're not going into the Big 12 trying to play catch up. They want to be among the top in the conference and compete at a competitive level. And I think that right there, that's a glaring disadvantage that Houston will be facing once they get into the Big 12, because heck, even look at SMU with what they announced. I believe that was last week with what was it, 36,000 for each student athlete playing in men's basketball and football,
right?
Which that's incredible right there. And SMU is not even one of the programs that's going to be jumping into the Big 12 within the coming year. And that in and of itself, that's something that SMU has a recruiting advantage over Houston in the state. Even if it comes to athletes, you could choose between Houston and SMU. If you go to SMU, you're going to be have guaranteed at the minimum $36,000. What does Houston have? And kudos to everything with Hoops and Holler and what they have done. They've done a phenomenal job. They've been able to step up to the plate, but they need much more businesses, much more alumni to be able to help out as well. Because, like I said earlier, it can't be a one business thing carrying the entire load.
Agreed. And SMU is one school in the state stepping up to the plate in terms of NIL. And let me be clear, all three of us agree that something needs to be done. Make sure it's on the up and up. Okay, don't bend any rules. Take advantage of the rules that are there regarding NIL. If you have questions, ask the right folks. Texas Tech Collective is doing $25,000 for football players and men's and women's basketball players. $25,000 each for them. So it can be done. And there are, I choose to believe, enough alums, enough supporters of the University of Houston, UH Athletics, who are wealthy, who have connections. If they're not wealthy, have connections to folks who are wealthy, who could form a very effective NIL collective to do something similar to what SMU is doing. A&M started doing, one of the first, earliest schools take advantage of the NIL rules. Baylor's probably doing, Texas, all the big time programs. I've said it before. I think each of you said it as well. UH wants to be in big time athletics. Big time athletics requires things. You need to do certain things. And an NIL collective is one of those things. If you want to be big time, you got to step to the plate, be big time. So we are almost 10 and a half months away from Houston joining the Big 12. And as far as we know, Hoop and Holler, Houston, is so far the major collective associated with UH Athletics. I hope it's not the only one. It might be the only one that we know about. I get emails from the folks at Hoop and Holler to announce certain deals with UH athletes. More needs to be done. More money needs to be done. It's easy for me to say because it's not my money. I don't have it to give. If I did, I'll put it out there. If I had it to give, I would have already created a collective. because I suggested it to alums months ago. And certain alums that you guys know, crickets. And now we're 10 and a half months away from joining the Big 12. And now folks are like, oh, we need to get a collective. No stuff. Yeah. Make it happen. Ask the questions. If you got questions, concerns, pool your resources, your contacts together, and get this done. As Andy said it, SMU's $36,000 per player for football and men's basketball. I'm kind of curious about what the SMU women's basketball players think about this, and if they're going to get maybe not 36, but if they're getting something, because is it not a Title IX issue? Why are you giving the men's team X amount of dollars and we're not getting any? But these things need to be addressed. And yes, SMU is for now still in the American. There's been talk about them maybe going to the Pac-12, you know, as a possibility for the Pac-12 going forward. But if it comes down to it, there will be some players, not a lot. Some might say they're coming down between Houston and SMU. Yeah, I know Houston's going to the Big 12, but 36 grand per year is 36 grand more than I'm getting from Houston.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to SMU. We don't need to have that. Okay, so take advantage of the city of Houston, the resources, the people, the alumni, huge alumni here in Houston. It's national, it's global. Come on, folks. We can do this. We need to be, it's too late to be proactive, but be active, get involved, and make this happen once again. And I'll get off my high horse, let you guys chime in. We're very good, and I'm saying we because I'm an alum. We are very good at talking about wanting to be big-time athletics and then do very little to follow up on it and do the things that are necessary to be big-time athletics. You guys have the floor.
I mean, you hit most of the points. I would just add, like, these next 10 months, I mean, are going to show a lot. Just, I think UH obviously needs to do a better job keeping people updated with Houston Rise and how that's working and sort of numbers there. But seeing, can they meet that goal and can we get NIL collectives done? If that doesn't happen in this next 10 months before the Big 12, then there's going to be some problems going in. So I mean, this is the time now that fans and alums have to act. And I mean, it will be very evident, like Kris said, if people are just, chiming out ideas and being like, we need to do this, and but just sitting back and doing nothing, or actually, getting their hands dirty and doing something to help them. So we'll see. But yeah.
Andy? We can't hear you, man. What are you doing to your microphone, man? You doing something different this show?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I adjusted to a different mic, so I'm learning as I go as well. But what I was going to say is that I wanted to go back to the tweet that I shared with you guys over the weekend, which is from @Jaron Properties, or @Jaron Prop. The business name is Jaron Properties, but he tweeted, "Attention all @Go Cougs, donors and alumni, we need an NIL collective fund for our athletes." And he tagged the official University of Houston account, the athletics Twitter account, the men's basketball Twitter account, the football Twitter account. And I mean, they got a relatively good engagement. I think the most important thing out of that is that you had a couple of football players, and actually not only a couple of football players, but it looks like even De'Aaron King chimed in on that tweet about Houston needing an NIL collective. I think it just goes back that you're going into the Big 12. You're going to be competing against these schools. You're going to be competing against big-time programs in the state of Texas alone, not even counting what the bigger grand landscape is in the future. And we've mentioned in the past, the Big 12 is great. Is that the ultimate goal? Are you trying to pivot your way into position yourself so you can be able to at least be an option if the Big 10 or the SEC, probably leaning towards Big 10 if that possible, and right now that's a big if. It just goes back that they have to be reactive if that's their goal. Now if they're content with being where they are now, then I guess an NIL collective is not necessary if they're trying to be as great as they possibly can and be in the fourth largest market in the United States. I think it's something that you have to do.
And could I just
go ahead? Yes, James.
I was just going to say, like, going back to sort of what all of you have been talking about basically, but more on the recruiting side of things. Like we've already talked about before. Chris Pesman's mentioned it. Dana, Kelvin, they've all mentioned, how it's going to take a while for them to catch up with Big 12 facilities. So having worse facilities and not being able to, provide any compensation for players through an NIL collective, like that's going to make it a real hard recruiting pitch. I mean, at least if you can get a collective, then yeah, you can say, our facilities might not be as good as Texas is right now, but we're working towards that. We've been playing, but we don't have the best facilities and we're not going to pay you. Then, I mean, it's a much easier decision for a kid to say, well, if I'm going to Baylor because they're going to pay me this much and they got better facilities. So there's definitely the bottom line, like you've been saying, is, to compete with the big boys in the Big 12, you got to step up, and that starts with, financially raising more money and doing it different than you have.
Yeah, and like Kelvin's mentioned, Houston's already behind in terms of being able to catch up with those Power 5 programs, and they're already playing catch up. So if you don't have an NIL collective, that's just going to separate the distance between you. And again, just focusing on the interstate schools that are inside the state of Texas, there's already a huge gap. And if you're trying to close it, you need an NIL collective. Simple.
And another thing Coach Sampson said, stop doing what you've always done if you want things to be different. We're good at that. We can, boy, remember what it was back in the day, blah, 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 blah. It's that Houston is about to go to the Big 12. That is big time athletics. It's not the Big 10. It's not the SEC. We know that. But it is a step up from the American. It's a higher step up than the Mountain West. I mean, is the goal for alums, okay? This is what I like alums to chime in on Twitter, but we're doing a poor job of it today. I'm doing a poor job of it today. My fault. About Folks Talk Sports, putting it up there, our Twitter account. But chime in on Twitter. Chime in on the YouTube channel where you're watching us right now. What is the goal? Is the goal to just be content being in the Big 12? Or is the goal to be competitive and to win championships in the Big 12 and to be active and proactive in the Big 12? Because, if you just want to be content with the $20 million we get, do nothing else, okay, keep doing what you're doing. But if the goal is to be legitimate contenders year in, year out, bring in elite athletes year in, year out in these major sports, you got to do things differently. You got to be more active, more involved in this. And we'll put this comment up. Appreciate this comment. Let's continue these shows. Love hearing about the Cougs. And it's not just us. It's not just Folks Talking Sports. It's not just Let's Rage Cougs. Both of those are on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. And, of course, this show is on Folks Talk Sports on Twitter. Coug fans. Who is that? I'm having a brain cramp. But there's other places that do shows focusing on UH athletics.
Scott and Hallman, guys.
Support them. Not just us. Support us, support them to get the word out about the programs, about the athletes, about the coaches. Because I promise you, the majority of the other schools in the Big 12, they support the shows, the programs, the news, media outlets that cover their teams. They do a hell of a lot more support than what the UH alums do for us. So, again, what do you want to accomplish? You just want to be happy about being middle of the pack or bottom of the Big 12? Or do you want to actually compete in championships and not just men's basketball, football? Coach Holgerson is doing a better job recruiting. But, guys, if there's no collective, at some point, there will be players, not just one, that's going to look at it. Houston is I'm from Houston. It's in the Big 12 now. But they have no NIL collective. Baylor, it's further drive from my family, but they got NIL. Or Lubbock, Texas Tech, they got NIL. What do you think that kid's going to do? Don't give them that option if everything's equal, except NIL. Remove that as part of the discussion. Got to do this. You have to be. We got to be active, be more involved, and part of the NIL, part of the supporting the programs, part of supporting. It's not just a Chronicle that covers Houston Cougars athletics. Okay, you guys, I think I'm assuming this. You tell me in a second. Have seen, heard alums saying, "Man, the Chronicle doesn't do enough coverage of Houston athletics. They don't cover. They spend more time covering the Aggies, or they cover the Longhorns, or covering LSU. We need more people, more media to cover UH." Here we are. We're here, and there are others out there that cover UH that do a good job, and in some cases, no shade to the Chronicle, maybe a better job. Support them. Support us. Stop just talking about it. Be about it. You want to see change? You got to be part of that change. James, Andy, you got it.
And I will add on to this, and I won't name names because it's probably not the best thing to do, but I will say with a local, this will probably narrow the options. I'll just say a local station in town. I won't say anything like that. I'll be quite frank. I just reached out just in terms of they'd be interested of just opportunity to freelance during the season when it comes to post-game coverage. And what they told me was that they have not seen enough interest when it comes to, now they kept it broad. They said when it comes to college athletics overall, they said they had, I can't remember the exact number, but long story short, they said that they had over thousands of followers on Facebook, and they couldn't get a single one to click on a college athletics articles. And when you look at their site, the last time they covered anything University of Houston related was a very, very short article when the men's basketball team was about to begin their March Madness run this past 2021. So that in and of itself, it's an interesting kind of lens to see, and where this is local. This is the big stations in town. They're affiliated with one of the big stations in town, and they said there's no interest from the people. If no one's clicking, then that's the reason there's less coverage. And even when we're focusing on, just think about it, the traditional TV stations, how often do you see reports from them on TV when it comes to UH athletics? They all kind of gather around when it comes to March Madness time, but other than that, I mean, it's very few compared to when you think of a lot of these programs. I mean, you can't really compare it.
James?
Adding on to Andy's thing, I don't know the specifics of his, but I guarantee you if he was in Austin right now or College Station, that interest thing wouldn't be a problem for sure. They might shut him down for other reasons, but they're not going to turn him down because of we don't have the interest. And that's where you got to step up as if you truly want to support UH athletics, is, showing interest in coverage, because Andy's example is perfect. If you don't show the interest, people aren't going to pay, media companies aren't going to pay money to put out content that you want.
And to add on to that, and this is actually interesting because you mentioned a lot of the platforms that UH alums, that UH fans have. There was a thread that they got established about a few days, probably a couple of weeks ago. It was titled, "What Would It Take for UH to Get into the Big Ten?" And there was a lot of people that chimed in, but I'm just going to read one message that said, and kudos to this person, but they said that they're probably in the minority, but they said they have zero interest in joining the Big Ten. That's not us. I think the Big 12 is a perfect landing spot and fantastic for the most. It makes sense. The Big Ten is just a cash grab. He went on and said other things, but I think in and of itself, I agree that person's probably in the minority, but it's just an interesting lens where honestly, a lot of it's a mindset where it might be holding the University of Houston back. Now, another thing that was brought up, and this is something that the current administration, they've made an emphasis that they're trying to get more support from more recent alums that have just graduated, that are probably 5 years and less removed from graduating from the University of Houston. That's who they're trying to appeal to, because when you see a lot of the supporters, and even it'd be interesting to see a breakdown of the season ticket holders, both for football and men's basketball, and kind of see what kind of the age demographic is, because I tend to lean it. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I'm pretty sure that you'd probably lend towards most of the season ticket holders being higher up in age than it were to be a lot of the younger demographic, which in and of itself, that's a problem if they can't get support from younger alums.
Agreed. Both you guys have hit on very good points. Let me say this. We've been to TDECU Stadium for football games. We've noted that the average attendance, 25,000 or whatever. And we can say that's because of the opponents in the American. Okay, that 25,000 would be bottom of the Big 12. I don't know if it's dead last, but darn close to it if it's not dead last.
I think it's worse in Kansas, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
that's rough.
So think about that. Okay,
by a good stretch as well. It's not like it's
so. And let me say this, and I'm trying to wrap it all up here. Jackson State University, Jackson State football, SWAC school, HBCU. Average attendance 40,000. Okay, 40,000. And it said Houston's 25,000. And we say what I've heard for years since I was going to UH, you guys' age, going to UH. Houston is a pro town. It's not a college town. All I hear is excuses. Okay, we know this is a pro town. Okay, if you know that going in, then it's up to you as an UH, administration, marketing, alums, all those things. Then what are you going to do to reach the fans, your alums? What are you going to do to give them incentive, give them reason to come support the football team, to come support the basketball team? What are we going to do to get them to spend money on UH athletics if we are alums? Don't you want to support your school that gave you the great education to help you go forward in the real world? I mean, I just don't understand. I've heard it for 30 years. Well, it's a pro town, so we can only do so much. Okay. That's an excuse. I've heard it for 30 years. What are we going to do differently now than going to the Big 12? So I just don't understand why we just continue to say and do the same things that I've heard since 1990 when I was a freshman at UH. Again, there are outlets, and I'm not bashing the Chronicle. Okay, no way. I have a lot of colleagues over there, do hard work, do great work, but they are not the only outlet that covers UH athletics. Okay, and the Chronicle is as Andy's pointed out, is an older demographic. Our media, we're a younger demographic, except for my old self. Okay, it's a younger demographic, and I'm not going to name names, okay? But when I say to the audience tuning in on Twitter and YouTube, when I say that UH has an open invitation to be on this show, and they have yet to take us up on that invitation, shame on you guys. Stop relying on the Chronicle. Stop relying on one specific FM station in town or one AM station in town to promote and discuss your program. They're not the only way to reach your alumni base. So again, you have an open invite to be on this show, to be on Let's Rage Cougs, to be on Pawd, Slama, Jama, to discuss UH athletics consistently. If you want to have a regular time slot on these shows, you could do that too. But, okay, so, I mean, and that comment from Tony, and Tony is a regular, consistent fan on the Let's Talk Houston Rockets live stream show on the channel, YouTube channel, who's come over to start participating in the Folks Talkin Sports streams. He's looking forward to basketball season. Not just Cougs, basketball in town. I mean, that is part of, he's discovered UH and other college teams because of this show, because of Houston Roundball YouTube channel, not the Chronicle. not 610, 790, whoever the hell 950, because of this channel. There are more ways to reach your audience. Stop doing the same. And the weird thing is, guys, they're doing the same things they've done for years and are expecting different results. Stuff that didn't work 30 years ago, they're still trying. And they're like, I can't figure out why we're not getting more season ticket holders. Really? Okay, have at it, because we can talk about some other stuff too. But I mean, y'all know how I feel about UH. I love my school. But when I think they're doing wrong, I'm going to say so. And they have just dropped the ball on this for so many years. I've been critical of this, of my school. Let's see, I was privileged enough to be on sports talk shows, all the radio stations, sports shows, 25 years ago. I said some of the same things I'm saying now, I said then. Very little's changed. Come on, folks. We have to do better if we want things to change. Andy, you got it. James, you got it. Whatever you want to discuss, let's do it here as we keep talking Cougs on Folks Talkin Sports.
Well, I mean,
No, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, James. No, I was going to say you hit on all the points. So James, I'll defer to you.
I mean, my big thing, one way I think really to engage with the young alumni, I think it's got to start with the current student base, because if you look at, this is going to be my 4th year at U of H. Not once have I been to that student section at TDECU. I'm talking about football specifically, where it's been remotely full. 50% average probably. Tickets are free. A lot of schools, big schools, you have to buy a sports pass or some sort of thing. You're paying for your tickets. Tickets are free. They say there's only 5,000. They haven't had a problem with that because they don't get that many. That no one ever fills that up. But they've found ways to add stuff in the past, like with basketball and stuff. I'm sure if you want to go to the game, you can. You've got to find a way to engage with the students currently there and get them showing up to games. And another big problem is 50% or whatever is filled with the student section. By halftime, it's down to 3 rows of seats with students filled in them. And so you got to find a way to get them to the games and get them engaged, because if they're not engaged while they're there, it's going to be hard to keep them engaged when they're out of school and want to come back as alums. So I think that's a big issue you got to find, because there's no reason why at a school, like 47,000 kids?
Yeah.
Last
47,000 students.
You can't get 5,000 kids to show up for a football game for free. You don't have to do anything. You literally go online, click a few buttons, and you get a free ticket. If you can't get 5,000 kids, like, you got to try something else, because, I mean, the future of the fan base and the alums, like I said, if you're not getting them engaged now, it's going to be a lot harder when they're gone and, or in the real world, have a lot of problems. Why they want to go spend their money on a Saturday, waste their time doing this. If they're not engaged now, good luck.
That's a great point. I think now the question becomes, how do they get that buy-in? And really, it has to be something where they buy into that UH identity, that they're proud of going to the University of Houston. I think something that's been brought up before, and I know something a lot of alumni, probably certainly the older demographic, are touchy on, is when people say there's not really a lot of that strong identity when it comes to, again, going back to the younger alumni that affiliate with the University of Houston. A lot of oftentimes they're there to get a degree and they move on. And like James said, that's something that has to change. And it's interesting to see how, and obviously this is much bigger than just the athletics department. This is overall the administration as a whole. How can things change for you to be able to get that buy-in? And to be quite frank, that's something that has to start from day one, when they have the new student orientations on campus, and everyone has to come in here for that. I think that's really when you have to start making that pitch. And I know they've shown videos in the past where they have Calvin Sampson come out and talk to some of the groups for the new student orientation, but I think it has to be consistent, where they're going out to students. I mean, they have to go to them. They have to find them at the student centers. They have to find them on campus. But it'd be interesting to see. You have to fully commit to be able to get buy-in my opinion. It can't be something that we'll do over the summer, we'll do on the first week of classes. It has to be consistent throughout. And like James said, for over 45,000, north of 45,000 students, to not be able to get 5,000 to get into football games on a consistent basis, there's a problem there, and it'll be interesting because they have to fully commit to address it.
James, you touched on it a few times in previous shows about the Daily Cougars freshman welcome to Houston. What do you want to call it? What do you want to call it, James?
Oh, it's called the First Roar.
The First Roar. How can I put this? Is there any advertising from UH Athletics in the First Roar?
I have not gotten a physical copy. When we were putting together, I'm pretty sure typically there's always been like a little football schedule thing. I'm pretty sure I saw that this year, but that's typically the only thing. Okay, during the school year on our regular prints, typically at the bottom of the cover page or one of the pages, there'll be like a little tiny slip that will say, Dana Holgerson wants you to come out to the next home football game or whatever, but it's not really a huge, like, it's not like eye grabbing or anything. But in the First Roar, I think there's a football schedule and that's about it. But there's plenty of advertising for us. Like, it's open to anyone. We have full pages taken out by people. We have, you can get a quarter page. You can do whatever. Like, we don't have an advertising problem with the First Roar, but I'm pretty sure, that's the only one, UH Athletics.
Okay, so that's a problem to me. If you're just putting in the schedule and nothing else, let the students know that it's free. First 5,000 get in free at home games. You got to do that. I mean, that's simple advertising. So it's just things like that. Simple advertising in the Daily Cougar. Doing a better job promoting it on shows like this, on the UH Sports Twitter accounts, on the UH TikTok account, on the UH Instagram account. That's simple advertising. That's, reach your audience that way. There's a lot of different ways. If you want to do this, if you have in mind that you want and need to bring in younger demographic to the games and to keep them coming back to the games, we know it's hot. We know it's hot and humid in Houston. We know that. So bring more water, bring more sodas, bring more Gatorade, Powerade, whoever the sponsor is.
The heat ain't keep other people out.
Yes. It's not a problem for other people in the state of Texas to go to the games, to tailgate and have fun, and to come back and support their schools. One of the biggest problems we have, and we're going to get into ESPN, Big Ten in just a second, and it's a mentality that Andy touched on a little bit, is UH has to do a better job of getting alums to want to see UH play. Not the opponent, to see Houston play. Whoever, it should not matter that it's Kansas, that it's Rice, that it's TSU, Grambling. Should not matter, but it does. If you're an alum, you should want to support and come see Houston. Football, basketball, baseball, that is the issue. That has been the problem. You got to change the mentality and do things differently. And reach out to the prominent alums. And one thing we talked about a little bit in Twitter conversation. Who are the prominent alums for the younger generation that the youngsters that you guys can relate to? Lizzo, young alums that they recognize, because it's not Jim Nance and Akeem. That's my generation. You got to get people influencers to say, come see UH play Rice. Come see UH play Texas Tech. Come to UH play the Garbage Bowl team. Whoever the hell. Just come see UH play at TDECU Stadium. I'll be there. Something like that. You got to do things differently to reach a younger audience if you want fans to come to the games and then come back to the games. So, I mean, it's just so much more. And that right there, Tony's right on point. They got to reconnect with the community. They need to do a better job. And I know it. Folks say, well, I live too far away. I live in the Woodlands. You know, it's a long commute. Blah, blah. Another, it's an excuse. Find out where your fans are. Set up buses. Set up whatever the hell you need to do to get them to come to the games, and then give the reasons. Once you get them in the stadium, give the reason to come back to the games, to see the next home game. If you want to do this, there are ways for you to do this. If you don't, just keep doing the same sorry stuff you've been doing, and you get the same sorry results. 25,000 attendance in the Big 12 will be an embarrassment. It will be an embarrassment. TV games, and there'll be a point on the games, on the broadcast. Somebody's going to say, you know, Big 12 fans of other Big 12 teams, man, do you see how many folks, see how empty TDECU Stadium was? Man, this is embarrassing. Look at this. We let them in the Big 12? Why? They can't even, you know, we'll hear that. We're going to hear it. And you know what's going to end up happening? 75% of the tickets that are bought will be Baylor fans, Texas Tech fans, TCU fans. Is that what you want? That's what's going to happen. Unless we do things differently, that's what's going to happen. Andy, you got something you want to say?
No, I was going to say that was something that was brought up multiple times last season, and it continues to get brought up into this season, where you hear a lot of, especially a lot of fans of the other Big 12 schools, where they make an argument as to, you know, what, and I've seen this on social media a couple of times where people say, why Houston, for the lack of a better term, in terms of, like you mentioned, when it comes to that attendance. Now, I know the biggest example that some people mocked. Now, obviously, it was due to circumstances that was out of control of Houston, but it was that game against East Carolina where it got rain delayed for up to 5 hours, or
I think it was longer than that, because
yes,
at least 5, but yeah.
Yeah, and that game, of course, that game ended up going into overtime, and it had a finish where Alton McCaskill had the game-winning score, and when the cameras zoomed out, there was no one in the stands left. Now, granted, that's a game that had really unusual circumstances with that delay, but I know that when that game-winning score by McCaskill got posted on social media, and I believe it might have gotten posted by ESPN or one of those similar platforms, you look at the comments, that's something that was pointed out by people there, like, oh, why is there no one in the stands? Now, again, granted, that's something that was out of anyone's control. That had to do with the weather, but it certainly gets viewed, and it's something that's been brought up before, even when it comes to Fertitta Center, with the way the camera is angled and it's facing away from the student section. I know it's been brought up a couple of times during the season this past year as well. So it's an issue that's across the board, and it again, it has to be full commitment to be able to target that and get people to fill in the stadiums. And at some point, it might get to the point where they're might even have to expand the student section if they can get people in there. I know James mentioned it's a problem, but if they can't get people in for free, it's a bigger problem to get people in to pay, which is what the tickets are, $25 to get in, just to get into the stadium. I think that's the cheapest that I've seen. If they can't get them in for free, it's a bigger problem.
And one final thing I wanted to add, just with Chris's point about, you know, not making excuses, especially with like travel. You brought up how, you know, like 75% Baylor fans or whatever. Yeah, there's plenty of Baylor alum in Houston, but there's thousands that are going to be making the drive from Waco. Yep. The Woodlands is a relatively short drive compared to Waco, Lubbock, Austin, Fort Worth, whatever. There's going to be fans from all these schools that are making the 3, 4, 5, 6 hour trip down to Houston to watch their team play. So, you know, living 30 minutes from TDECU.
Yeah, you know, we're good. And it's past the point of reasons. These are excuses now. Okay. Hey, we know that the traffic construction around UH, TDECU, Fertitta has been a bitch. We know that. Okay. So what are you going to do to accommodate fans, make it easier for them to get there? More buses, shuttles, something. If you want people to be there, then you need to do things to get them there. Because if you don't, Then stop complaining about, well, I don't know why people aren't showing up. Okay. All right. A few days ago, hasn't been announced officially yet, but all signs point to ESPN not having Big Ten, apparently, football and basketball going forward. That the Big Ten will have media rights deals with Fox Sports, CBS, and NBC. Andy, your thoughts on that? Because you have some concerns for what this means for the Big 12.
Absolutely. And my biggest concern is if the Big Ten is taking away Fox and CBS and even NBC when it comes to that premier time slots to be opportunities for the Big 12 to be able to showcase their top tier games. If CBS and Fox Sports are taken, if NBC are taken by the Big Ten, and obviously, of course, we know that ABC and the main ESPN channel, ESPN by itself, are taken by the SEC. What does that leave the Big 12 in terms of being able to get their games out into a bigger market? And obviously, of course, we've talked about it, how when it comes to Fox Sports, they already have a relationship with the Big 12. But would that translate to more games being on FS1, FS2? If they can get a deal done with ESPN, does that translate to more games on ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPNU, ESPN3, the ESPN Plus? That's my biggest concern, because I think, honestly, that might end up being a worst case scenario in terms of exposure for the Big 12, because there's much more limits to what the free market can dictate. And honestly, it might end up hurting the Big 12 when it comes to negotiations now that I would assume the options are much more limited now. I believe for the deal that's been reported, or what it could look like, would be a Big Ten games on CBS. I want to say Big Ten on Fox would be the ones that would be on at the early window, correct? And then
11 for us, 11 a.m. Central Time, yes.
And then CBS would be that 2:30 to 5 slot, and then NBC would be the primetime Saturday night slot for the Big Ten. So that in and of itself, that limits your options. And then, like we mentioned, ABC is going to be carrying the SEC on its flagship times, and so will the main ESPN channel. What else is there? And I think that should be a big concern. I think that might end up being the worst case scenario. So I'll toss it out there. I'd love to hear both your thoughts on that.
James?
Yeah, I mean, like Andy said, he brings up legitimate concerns, and this is definitely the Big 12's gotta. I mean, it's a tricky situation for sure, but like we've been talking about before, they've got to just be active looking for any sort of deal, because like you said, these Big Ten games are going to be slated all day, where you can watch from early morning until midnight. SEC, everything's going to be on. You've got to find a spot, or I mean, interest will die down. Money's not coming in, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Big 12 and Brett Yormark handles this. But we'll see what happens. I think another thing that will be interesting is just like, it will make college football a little weird on Saturdays, just like you're used to, like hearing Kirk Herbstreit and call the big game or whatever. But if it's on NBC, the best game of the week, because of a Big Ten deal or something, like, it's just going to be, I think it's going to be really weird overall, but we'll see.
I agree with you guys from the competition for bidding is taking a hit, with the Big Ten now being on NBC and CBS. Well, will be on NBC and CBS for at least one time slot. It gives ESPN money to spend that they're not spending on the Big Ten. But the question is, as Andy's noted, where will the Big 12 play? A time slot could be the 2:30 time slot on Fox Sports. It could be on FS1, FS2, and ESPN2. The non-major networks. But Andy, excuse me, what if it's money is the issue? This is the concern all three of us have in Big 12 schools and admins have as well. ESPN has money to spend. Will they spend it on? How will they spend it? Because they do want to still spend it on women's sports, as in the NCAA tournament, softball. They are big advocates of both those two sports that have been undervalued for years. So some of the money that they're not spending on the Big Ten will go toward that, as well as the college football playoff. So how much will be left over for the Big 12 as well as the Pac-12? So you guys know my hope is that for the Big 12 to get to earn half of what the Big 10 and SEC will get in media rights. Guys, half. That's a lot of money compared to the AAC. But after a while, that's nothing. 50 million compared to 100 million. You talk about being behind, going into the Big 12. You're going to be way behind. And think about this. Houston would be way behind Vanderbilt. Way behind Rutgers. Okay? That means that's where college football, college athletics is heading when you got a non-football power like Vanderbilt going to receive potentially twice as much in revenue than Oklahoma State, Miami, Florida, hell, Clemson. Think about that. Something's wrong with the system when Rutgers and Vanderbilt are getting $100 million per year and Clemson isn't in media rights deals. That's an issue I have, a whole other different topic. But yeah, Andy, James, what if ESPN, Fox, I don't know who else, but the media rights deal is for each Big 12 member is $50 million. Hell, let's hope $40 million per school. Is that enough? I mean, how long will that be good enough for the current Big 12 schools? What can they do? I mean, if that's all there is, what can they do?
That's the question right there. And the options are limited because unless if you can get into the Big Ten or SEC, there's honestly not much you can do. I mean, what else are you going to do? There's not the Pac-12 isn't going to come and be able to offer more. You're already in the Big 12, the ACC. It's complicated, and it's kind of a situation where it's starting to become the Big Ten and SEC, and there's a line, and then there's everybody else.
And James, I want you to chime in after I say this. Why are fans okay with this? Why have fans spoken up about this? Because this is where we're headed. Again, potentially two an NFC, AFC type conferences, Big Ten and SEC. Why would Houston, Baylor, Texas Tech alums continue to spend millions of dollars? We're talking get back to the collective. Why, specifically football, why are we spending millions of dollars for football if our team has no chance in hell of competing with the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC when the revenue gap is double? Why continue just throwing money after bat? We don't have a chance to make up a gap of $50 million per year. Over 10 years, that's $50 million times 10. That's $500 million. You're never going to catch up on that. And the sad thing to me is the alums and fans in the SEC and the Big Ten, their response is, well, better us than you. Yeah, well, tough luck for you. It ruins the sport if you only have 10 teams with a chance to compete going forward year in, year out. 10 teams, 20 teams, Vanderbilt got enough money to pay better facilities, coaches, all these things. Vanderbilt, not Oklahoma State football, Vanderbilt. And people are like, yeah, well, that's the way things going to be. That's why college football, it's semi-pro football. That's what it is. And it's getting worse. James, you got it, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on just worrying about the future state of college football for the exact reasons, like you said. I think one thing is a lot of fans don't realize, like, just all these financial numbers. Like, if you look at U of H, for example, they say, oh, we're going from 8 million a year to 20 whatever in our first 3 years in the Big 12. Great, we're going to be able to do so much more. No, not really. Like, you still got that massive gap. And so they think, any type of upgrade or in money is, but I mean, yeah, you get to do a little more, but you're still way behind the current Big 12 schools, and then even further behind Big 10, SEC. So I think one, like, just the knowledge, a lot of fans don't realize that. And going back to previously, what you asked Andy about, I think one of the only, like, options that you'd see, I don't think it's realistic, but like schools trying to do the Notre Dame route where they get like an NBC exclusive right. Obviously, it wouldn't be NBC if the Big Ten stuff works out, but like try to give some network exclusive rights to their. But I don't think that's realistic, or that's going to be able to.
How many schools can you do that? How many schools can pull that off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I mean, there's so many issues, but I think that's one of the only possible. Like, or you go like the Longhorn Network route, but that's not going to make you much money compared to what these other media rights are getting. So there's so many question marks, and like you've been talking about, there's not a lot of room to play with. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And yeah, college football is going to look a lot different. I mean, it already is starting to, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like you said, there might, instead of, having all these teams play top 25, are we going to have a top 10? Because we just don't have, the other schools are so far ahead in money, facilities, everything, that it's 10 versus the rest, the separate division. I don't know. It's a real issue, but
it's going to get worse, and we'll see if the people making the decisions will realize it and try to make a change 10 years from now. But it's going to get worse, and expanding the college football playoff would help, because you'd at least give the Big 12 champion a chance to be in the playoff, to compete, for the championship, rather than the current invitational format is what it is right now. But beyond that, there's not much that can be done. I like the suggestion of the Big 12, the Longhorn Network becoming the Big 12 Network once the Longhorns join the SEC, because at minimum, the Big 12 would join the ACC, Big 10, and SEC as networks, conferences that have a network pretty much on linear platform. So that would help with some, getting your games on the Big 12 network and still have the Big 12 on ESPN Plus. But how much money would that generate? How much money would ESPN be willing to pay the conference? Will that help make up any bit of the gap? Because ESPN right now, they're sitting pretty. Their deal with the SEC is $300 million for football and basketball. CBS and NBC paying $350 for football, as far as we know right now. We don't know where Big Ten basketball is going to be, because everything we've heard so far, read so far, pertains to Big Ten football. We just know that the deal that ESPN backed away from means that Big Ten basketball will not be on ESPN. That might change, because if it doesn't, where the hell is Big Ten going to have their games, basketball games? On FS1? On NBC Universal? So where are those games going to play? And that's men's basketball. What about women's basketball? So a lot of things still left to be determined. We'll discuss them in future shows of Folks Talking Sports. James, how can folks find you and interact with you, sir, on social media?
Yeah, be sure to follow me on Twitter at JDM2186, as you can see below. And then all my coverage regarding anything UH athletics is at thedailycougar.com.
And Yanez?
Yeah, people can find me on Twitter at Yanez_5. On August 14th, that we're recording this, we're officially 20 days out until September 3, which means that we are only 20 days and 10 minutes after the UH-UTSA game until Let's Rage Cougs officially makes its return following the hiatus since March 26th. I believe that was the last time the University of Houston men's basketball team played in the Elite Eight against Villanova. And I think this will be the perfect time, Kris, if you give me the green light to play the second commercial that we have not on Folks Talking Sports. Don't go anywhere.
And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Let's Rage Cougs.
I mean, that to me speaks to his ability, what he can do defensively.
Close it out because honestly, it seemed like Illinois kind of ran out of gas right at the end.
While they look so well offensively, get 19 assists on 32 made field goals.
And we bring in Paige Lawrence, former University of Houston track and field athlete.
And over and gaining the injury, really controlling the game here.
I'm curious to see how I know he's going to do something, but
he just had to get better.
That was kind of what they were doing. That was their game plan.
September 3, following the University of Houston and UTSA football game. This would be a perfect time to segue that we are still looking for sponsors. So if you are interested, please be sure to reach out at andyanna05@gmail.com, or you can reach out via any of our personal Twitter accounts. And we will be sure to respond to you. Exciting time overall, like I said, 20 days until UH and UTSA, but just overall, we're getting really close to September, which means football season is here, and we're about 2 months out until basketball season. The NBA is starting to have leaks of their NBA schedule, so an exciting time, the best time of the year, the fall. That's my favorite time of the year. So, like I said, at @Yanez_5 on Twitter.
Looking forward to that, Andy. Looking forward to the return of Let's Rage Cougs. Find me on Twitter at the HR Review. Houston Roundball Review.com is the website. Houston Roundball Review on Instagram. Houston Roundball Review on YouTube. And Mr. Yanez is going to help me do some IG reels. So want to learn how to do that, look out. So an old man learning new tricks. So look out for that. So go ahead, Andy.
For sure. No, I was just going to say, it's a perfect time to plug in my own personal Instagram. I guess it's my professional Instagram, but it's pretty similar to the Twitter. It's just at @Yanez5. There's no underscore on the Instagram, I believe. But like you mentioned, the reels, we had I was really proud of myself for the reel that I did, which the countdown, it's a cool audio that we were able to incorporate. But like you said, Kris, it's an exciting time on all social media platforms. And before we sign off, I'm gonna go guarantee after we're barely week 1 in the preseason of the NFL, and this might be me being a homer, but I won't say it. The Houston Texans played their first preseason game on Saturday, so August 13th. We're recording the day after. On August 14th, they played the New Orleans Saints. This is very, very small sample size, but I guarantee running back Dameon Pierce will rush for over 1,000 yards this season. Guarantee. He's got that. He's got it in him. I trust him the way he was gliding all over it, be it first preseason game. Injuries do void my guarantee, but I'll leave it there. I'll put it on a record August 14th before any regular season games have been played.
Sounds good. And noted. James, we're witnesses, okay? Noted.
Yeah.
With that guarantee from Mr. Yanez right there, we can follow him on Twitter for that throughout the season. And Andy, James, audience, there's a chance that I might sing a couple times on these IG reels. I'm just saying. It may not be professional, but whatever. I'll tie it into business too, but, gotta let the fans
get
know.
those followers up.
That's it. So that's what I'm doing that too. So, look for that in the future. But as always, thank you very much to the people who commented during the show, who watched the show. Andy, James, as always, thank you for your time. And we'll do it again next week. One more time, Willie Gibson was at his high school reunion today. So that's why he's not with us on today's show, talking Big Ten and the Ohio State Buckeyes. But he'll be back next week. But as always, tune into another edition of Folks Talking Sports. You can catch it on Twitter at Folks Talk Sports, as well as on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. Until next time, everybody, take care. Peace.